Rangers fans, welcome to Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast. I'm Andrew Chonley, alongside Nick Zararis. And Nick, the best two words in hockey, Game 7 tonight. Oh, baby, we got ourselves a game.
At the very least, I think every Ranger fan can feel a little bit better than where we were a week ago or a week and a half ago, where everybody was looking around thinking we could have beat Edmonton in 5 games based on how the first 3 games went. I'm not saying the Rangers would have done X, Y, or Z in this series, but I think you can take a little bit of solace in the fact that the Oilers did not get swept, that they have responded very well, and that what happens this season doesn't necessarily have bearing on future seasons. You know, we talked last week the idea that, you'd like to avoid Florida if you can next year in the playoffs, but it's not just Florida. You know, even if you get past Florida, you're telling me this Rangers team was going to be able to put a pin in McDavid for 7 games to win a series. So I think we can take everything kind of as it comes. And that's the first real topic of today's episode is just, this is one big game of telephone right now. I have gotten tips in the last week. I'm sure you have gotten tips in the last week. Everybody is getting cold DM solicitations of, I'm hearing this. Chris Johnston, who is a reputable reporter, is getting DM drops of, oh, I'm hearing this. Larry Brooks saying, sources are conflicted whether or not the Rangers would like to move on from Jacob Trouba. Larry is getting conflicting reports. This is all one big game of telephone. For all we know, we're all getting DMs from the same person on different burner accounts trying to further a narrative. That's the first thing I want to say when we're here. We're still in that weird, soggy in-between because the season is taking forever to finish. The draft is later this week, and the season somehow still isn't over. Free agency is next week, and the season still isn't over. And being that all of this stuff is getting compacted really close, I imagine this is all going to happen very fast on every single level. I imagine this Rutger-McGrody trade that is rumored to be out there will happen very quickly. The Nick Ehlers trade, if it comes to fruition, will happen very quickly. I imagine we will hear about a Mitch Marner extension in the next week.
Or a trade.
I think based on what we've heard, extension's more likely because I think Brad is too scared to trade him because he knows he's going to lose, and Brad loves to lose trades. So I think buckle up because as soon as this series is over, it's going to get crazy very, very quickly because then the buyout window's open and then we can start having those conversations looking around. There's a whole lot to unpack, and it's not just a Rangers perspective. You know, a lot of teams have to make a lot of decisions in the next week, and how those impact the Rangers is stuff we're going to get to today.
I'm really excited for the next few days. Well, first of all, I'm really excited for tonight. Like, yes. It is... it's not an understatement to say this is one of the biggest games in NHL history.
This is the biggest game post-lockout. Post-2005 lockout, sure. 100% this is the biggest game.
This is massive. I mean, for any team in any sport to come down to come back from 3-0 down is something that it happens so rarely that it's a statistical anomaly is putting it lightly. Like, these things don't happen. And the Panthers were the first 3 games, they were cruising. I mean, the Panthers were just doing whatever they wanted, whether it be in the neutral zone, the offensive zone. They weren't giving McDavid any space. The Edmonton's offense just didn't have much of anything to get going. And now the Oilers are stretch passing. These guys are skating up the neutral zone, odd man rushes. The Panthers aren't defending in their own zone the way that they have been the entire playoffs. This would have been nice 3 weeks ago, Florida, but I digress. This is insane. Like, you watch Florida the first 3 games and you're thinking, okay, I mean, Edmonton might get 1, but this is over in 5. Even when Florida was up 3-0, I feel like most people would have guessed that Edmonton would have at least won Game 4, and then Florida would have won at home in Game 5. That would have been the final. End of story. And then McDavid and co were like, "Wait a minute, hold on a second, hold on, I've got a trick for you." And then they came, and then they absolutely destroyed is a small
8-1 is about.
I mean, that is a complete domination of a team, and get to Game 5 and you think, okay, well, Edmonton got all the goals out. Florida's going to come back. They're going to respond. And then they didn't, and then Edmonton won Game 5. And then you go, okay, this is over in 6, right? Surely this is over in 6. And then Florida, you thought that they would respond, and then they didn't, and then Edmonton wins again, and you're like, oh my God, is this happening? This is, I mean, as a fan of neither team, I don't have any skin in the race here. I am going to have a blast tonight.
Edmonton got going in transition. It's the biggest difference from games 1 through 3 to 4 through 6. The fact that the Panthers had the puck a whole lot the last 3 games, didn't do a whole lot with it. Edmonton gets out to the multi-goal leads. Florida kind of breaks down structurally. Guys have to play individual defense. And when Florida is at their best, it's all 5 guys in the frame, on the puck, putting pressure, whether it's in the offensive zone on the forecheck, pressuring defensemen, or the defensive zone trying to recover loose pucks. Edmonton has been able to get Florida at a position to break down. They've put a lot of heat on Bob, where they haven't had a ton of quantity of chances, but they've made the most of the chances they have had in this series. I know I saw earlier today that Evolving Wilds model had him at like 5 goals saved above expected through the first 3 games, and now he's like 4 under for the last 3 games. So it's not just one thing. It's a confluence of several factors that have swung this series back the other way. But yeah, to echo your sentiments, this is what it's all about, man. It doesn't get better than this. These are 2 really good teams littered with star talent. I mean, you know how important a hockey game has to be for Stephen A. and Shannon Sharp to lead the show with it? Neither of those guys can name 3 players in this series. Neither of them. Like, they got a sheet from a producer this morning, Connor McDavid. Leon, how do you say Draisaitl? How do you pronounce that? That was the conversation this morning at about 8 a.m. when they did walkthrough this morning for First Take. Poor Gary had to call in and humor them and answer the dumbest questions imaginable. I mean, I get it. They're a television partner, but God, man, we deserve better. All right. Now, this is a Rangers podcast, so we do have to circle this conversation to the Rangers. So right now, as we know, they have some decisions to make. They made one. They got rid of Gaudreau, and they made $3.6 million in cap space. Right now,
thank you, Mike Greer, by the way.
He did his boy
doing us a solid.
He did Chris Drury a solid. That's all that is. They're sitting at about 11.8, 11.9 million in cap space at this exact moment. Lindgren and Schneider will eat somewhere between 6 and 8 million of that 11.5 to 12 million, depending on how those contracts shake out, whether they're term, whether they're bridges. And then we're talking about $3.5, $4 million. And they need 2 skaters and maybe 1 defenseman to fill out the lineup. So I'm going to toggle over to our depth chart here because this conversation starts here. This is what we're working with right now of only in-house guys. I have Edstrom penciled in at center. You could put Rempe in at center on the 4th line. Doesn't really matter. But right now, we're operating under the assumption that Kakko's gone. Based on what we've read, based on what we've heard, Kakko, they want to use Kakko in a draft pick to level him up into something. Whether that's a better draft pick or a polished NHL player, we'll see what happens. But right now, you're penciling in a need for at least 1 top 6 wing, probably a bottom 6 wing, and probably a 4th line center. If you want to say Brodzinski's the 4th line center and they get a 2nd wing and they replace Kakko and Brodzinski on the depth chart we currently have here, I could see a world where that's the case. And then you want to pencil in Berard or Othman or somebody else from that crop of young guys that's in Hartford to fill out the bottom 6. I think that's fine. I don't think that addresses their fundamental issues. But being that they don't have a lot of money to play with, I think that's kind of where they're at for right now. Things can change. We don't know. Like I said in the outset, Larry says he's hearing conflicting things, so God knows what everybody else is hearing. Because for all of the fun we like to poke at Larry, generally, he's got some semblance of a clue of what's going on around the team because he's been around since they were playing hockey with 3 people on each team. And then they went to 4, and then they went to 5, and they went from wooden sticks to composite metal, and now we're up here using carbon fiber. So he's seen it all. He's got a reasonable pulse, but if he doesn't know what they're doing with Trouba, no one knows what they're doing with Trouba.
I wish we would have at least a better understanding of what they would be doing with the blue line, because there's a lot of questions surrounding the blue line with Schneider's contract, Lindgren's contract. there's an argument to be made that Lindgren had such a bad year that it's an anomaly and that he'll sort of come back to what he was prior to this season. Whether or not I agree with that, I don't know. There's arguments for and against that. Schneider's an RFA. He was better last season, but he still wasn't super consistent. There was still some gaps in his game that the Rangers.
He was better than Trouba, and he got a promotion.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. But at the end of the day, those are two of the many questions that Drury still has to answer. He has to give either Lindgren a contract or trade him. He has to give Schneider a contract or he has to trade him. With Trouba, you would have to. I think the Lindgren and Schneider contracts are going to give you a better understanding of what Drury is going to do with Trouba, because July 1st is the deadline to sign to give the RFAs I think it's a qualifying offer, and then after that they have to give them big boy contracts, and I think we'll get more of an understanding before July 1st as to where the Rangers go with this money, because if before July 1st or maybe even before the draft they give Lindgren and Schneider decent contracts and they don't have a whole ton of cap space to go out and acquire multiple forwards, which they, let's be real, need, then I think that gives you a better picture of, okay, well, they have to shed salary somewhere. Well, exhibit number 8, there you go. There's $8 million that Drury is going to shed based off of the moves that he has made. If it's a very quiet draft, maybe even leading up to the draft or after the draft, it's very quiet, then maybe all we'll see is the re-signs and a couple of new free agents and Trouba stays. I think the next few days are very telling to see where Drury is with Jacob Trouba.
So one thing I do want to add on to that sentence, the Rangers are not going to come out and say, hey, we want to get rid of this guy.
Yeah, of course.
The Rangers are going to do what they can to maintain an illusion of value. You're trying to dump a bad asset. You're not going to come out, oh, this guy sucks, we don't want him on the team anymore.
But who does? Somebody, please take him. He's really good at the locker room stuff. So please, by all means, any takers, going once, going twice.
That's the thing. There's a world where they absolutely can move him. There is a market for every single player in this league, as improbable as that sounds. Teams have given up draft picks for Ryan Reeves 3 times in the last 3 years. Any player is tradable. If Wayne Gretzky can be traded 3 times, anybody can be traded. And that's not to compare Jacob Trouba to Wayne Gretzky. It's to say that rosters are very fluid in this league because the cap space is very hard to come by. I imagine if they are able to find a taker for Trouba, they are going to have to eat somewhere between 2 and 4 of the $8 million just to make it happen. Even if he only has 2 years remaining, and if he's going to a team like Utah that has a ton of cap space, they're still not going to want to eat the entire $8 million unless the Rangers really give them a good sweetener on top of that, which they won't do, because the Rangers very much, as we've talked about over the last few weeks, they're in their window. They are very much they are, at least messaging wise, they still think they are in the mix. They are going for it. They are a Stanley Cup contender. You look at this group, it's not bad. This is a solid team. This is probably a second round exit team. I think based on what we're looking at here, with Kakko, Brodzinski, Rempe down the right side, you need at least 2, if not 3 right wings. I don't think they're going to import 3 new guys into this forward group. I think they will pencil Othman into one of those spots, and then they will look at some candidates, and I've got a list of guys on another slide in this slideshow of guys who are available for different positions, just to kind of give you an idea. This isn't to start making cases and arguments for or against certain players, but just to give you an idea of who is out there, because I think one thing that we're struggling with, and I think and we're doing it too right now talking about Trouba, I think the Rangers, more than anything, they need to be more efficient in their roster construction. You wanted to talk about the Shesterkin extension. We'll get there in a minute because it's tied to this. Where you allocate your money tells people what you think about your team. In theory, the fact that the Rangers have all of this money tied up in just Fox and Trouba, and then Lindgren and Schneider and Miller are all about to get from that RFA to a decent pay salary, that would tell you the Rangers are a pretty good defensive team. If the salaries matched what the expectations were, you would think this would be comparable to the Jets team in 2018 or that Predators team that went to the Stanley Cup final that had Subban and Yossi and Ryan Ellis and Ekholm. That's not this group. This Rangers group is not good enough defensively. Puck-wise, it's not atrocious. There's definitely room for improvement, I should say, but it's not awful. The issue is the group is not well-rounded enough, and because they have yet to really find that complement for Fox, it's really kind of stagnated everything. I was talking about this yesterday with somebody, but the big reason Edmonton took the step forward they did this year in relation to years past, they have a legitimate first pair now. Bouchard and Ekholm are the best or second best pair in the entire league. The Rangers need to find their Matthias Ekholm for Adam Fox. They need to find that defensive defenseman that actively suppresses scoring chances against. You and I are operating under the assumption that's going to be K'Andre Miller if the Rangers are going to get where they want to go. That Miller needs to, I don't want to pigeonhole him and force him into a box, but he's got to kind of focus on, am I a puck mover or am I a defensive defenseman? Because right now he's in a tweener state where it goes back and forth. And because of that, he doesn't have enough consistency to his game. You could say the same thing for Schneider. Schneider, I'm more inclined to give a little bit of a pass to, because the previous two seasons, not this one that just finished, he's played with terrible partners. He hasn't had real opportunities to do anything more than just sink or swim. This was the first real extended run he got playing with a real defensive partner in Miller. And the results were not great, but it was a real big step up in competition. So addressing the elephant in the room for the Rangers, they spend a lot of money on a handful of guys. Panarin makes a lot of money. Zibanejad makes a lot of money. Trouba makes a lot of money. Fox makes a lot of money. Then you go a tier down. You get to Trocheck. You get to Miller next extension. But I'm going to toggle over to... Actually, no. Let's talk about Shesterkin real quick before we start talking
And one thing, too, real quick, is you have to remember that when you pay a lot of money to a few guys, and we talked about this for the past few weeks, is relying on other stars to want to come here is all fine and dandy when, one, they want to do that, and two, when you have the cap space to sign these people or trade for these people. It's great that, let's pretend that X, Y, and Z players want to come to the Rangers and that's what they're banking on. You need money to be able to do that. You need cap space to be able to do that. So it's the reliance on outside factors. We talked about this, I think it was last week, where you rely on other players that have success elsewhere or want to come here and all these things. That's fine, but you still need other players to fill out the roster. You can't sign 8 players to...
The Rangers need their Jalen Brunson, Andrew.
To $85 million. Yeah, exactly. It's the full $85 million cap hit, and then be surprised when you don't win the Stanley Cup. Like, you need 10 other guys on your roster. Like, you can't win a Stanley Cup with eight players. You just can't do it. You need all 18 plus your goalie to round up into a good enough team to just hang on till the very end. If you have 4 people making $30 million, guess what? When they're off the ice, then what? What are you gonna do?
That's the issue the Rangers are looking down the barrel of, because next summer they are going to pay Shesterkin top of the market because he's the best goalie or second best goalie in the world. He has been underpaid this entire contract, and there's going to be considerably more cap space in the market at large. If there were ever a summer for a team to take a crazy, ballsy, let's throw a ton of money at a free agent, it'll be next summer when the salary cap is somewhere between $93 and $95 million is what we're forecasting for next year based on how things go. The Rangers make a conference final again. The Bruins make a conference final. The Leafs. Then maybe it's 97, 98. But conservatively, you should pencil in another $5-ish million per team in the system next summer. The Rangers could not have come to a point where they need more money in the system at all, because the Rangers are looking at a point now where the entire point of taking their lumps for 2018, 2019, and 2020 was that they would have a bunch of cheap guys. They didn't win anything with them when they were all cheap. That's the real conundrum of it all.
Yeah.
Shesterkin's going to get paid. Lafreniere, if he plays the way he did this year, he's going to get paid. Miller is going to get paid. Are they going to pay Schneider and Lindgren long term? We have to see about that. But these guys are all going to get raises, which tells you the Rangers don't have room to bring in external candidates who are going to make big impacts unless they want to take less money. You know, if you can get guys to do the Mark Giordano, yeah, I'll take $900K to play because I want to be here. That's great. Yeah. You can't expect that to be the reality, though. You're not going to convince a lot of guys, hey, we'd love you to have you. How much do you have? We can do $925. Click. That's the end of the conversation. And I'm going to toggle over to this. This is organized by points, but these are all the free agents. You've heard Stamkos jokingly mentioned. Duchesne, not in the mix for the Rangers. Sean Monahan, probably not in the mix for the Rangers. Chandler Stevenson, I could see it, but that would mean moving Hedel to the wing. Adam Henrique, I don't think the Rangers would be willing to give him terms, so I don't think he's in the mix. Max Domi, I think, is definitely in the mix for the Rangers. Elias Lindholm is somebody the Rangers checked in on during the season, but based on the contract he reportedly declined for both Calgary and Vancouver, Rangers can't afford him.
He'd be one of those players where the only way the Rangers get Elias Lindholm is if he was like, give me 7 cents on the dollar and I'll come here. Because I only want to play here and I don't care how much money, you have to shave off my contract to make it happen. I want to be here. That's really the only way the Drury can sign Elias Lindholm, because he has other bigger problems to take care of. There's no way he can do all of that and then also sign Elias Lindholm. There's no way.
No, we talked about it at the outset. The Rangers are sitting at about $11.5, $12 million right now at this moment. Schneider, Lindgren, that's 6 to 8, depending on term and how far the Rangers are willing to go to keep those guys. That leaves you with $3.5, $4 million, and you probably need 2 forwards and a defenseman. You go over to and Wenberg is on here as well. He was the next forward up in points. I didn't mind Wenberg, but I don't think for what he's going to cost, the Rangers are going to prioritize him. I think they want more offense-oriented guys, and if they were going to spend to keep somebody in the middle six, or I should say acquire someone in the middle six, I think it would be someone else on this list. We go over to the winger tab. They were in on Gensel. Very clearly, Pittsburgh didn't want to trade him here without getting something crazy. They won't be able to afford Sam Reinhart. They won't be able to afford Jonathan Marchessault. I think Drouin is staying in Colorado. I think him playing with McKinnon matters to him too much.
Yeah.
Toffoli, the Rangers have been linked to. Tyler Toffoli is not a bad hockey player, but I don't think he complements what the Rangers need right now. He's not particularly fast. He's not particularly good in transition. He's a great shooter. If you put him on one of your planks on the power play, he's going to score 25 goals guaranteed. He's done it on good teams. He's done it on bad teams. He led the Flames in goals last year. He had a pretty solid first 20, 30 games with the Devils. Then when the Devils hit that wall in late November where the team started to stink, he stopped scoring. He got traded to Winnipeg. He was fine there. Tarasenko, I'd be fine with that. He won't be expensive, but again, he's not fundamentally changing the team.
I mean, the thing about Toffoli and Tarasenko is that these guys are good and they make the Rangers better, sure, but neither of these guys are fundamentally fixing the biggest problems the Rangers have offensively. They're not the biggest 5-on-5 drivers, and they're not the prime top 6 wing that you need for this team. They're solid if you already have a set 1 RW, then maybe you can argue Toffoli or Tarasenko could potentially slot into that 2 RW or maybe 3 RW slot, interchange those, make the depth better. That's a different conversation. But when you don't have that first line right winger, that star player to round out that first line, if you want to argue Lafreniere is the first line right winger, okay, but even then, it's not enough for what this team needs offensively. Toffoli and Tarasenko make this team better. Sure, no one's arguing against that. But is it what this team needs? Because again, if Toffoli or Tarasenko are like, hey, we'll take the league min or just $1 million to come here because we want to be here all day, every day, twice on Sundays. Give them a jersey right now. But they're going to want a lot of money, and the Rangers don't have that money. If you sign these guys, okay, well then now what?
Look at it from this perspective. If Tarasenko didn't want a lot of money, he would have been on the team this year. Because the Rangers could have given him $2-3 million in free agency last summer. He very clearly wanted more money up front, which, God bless him, you got to free agency. That's your right. Of course, he ended up in Ottawa, was miserable, and got traded to a team that played in the Stanley Cup final, which helps. If Tarasenko's your third-line right wing and gets on your second power play, that's fine. Yeah. He's not a first-line right wing in 2024. Sure. Teuvo Teravainen, kind of similar box. I think if he's your second-line right wing, you're fine. I don't think he's a first-line right wing. I'm also weary of anybody who's played for Carolina in the last handful of seasons because a lot of their underlying numbers are juiced to the gills from playing on a team that's such a volume-based offense that it's kind of hard to distill out their production from team production. And then the last one in the column who has a picture is David Perron. He's old. He's probably too expensive. But I definitely can see a world where David Perron is the type of player the Rangers are looking at. And I think there are more guys on the next tab who are trade candidates that fit that role better than David Perron. And then Tyler Bertuzzi, Patrick Kane, Anthony Mantha, Anthony Duclair, Warren Fogle, Jake DeBrusk.
I can't wait for another season of Patrick Kane discourse.
We're not doing Patrick Kane discourse. Call back tomorrow. This is WFAN. We're not doing Patrick Kane. I'm sorry. We're not. It's not interesting, and he doesn't address the Rangers' fundamental issues.
No, I'm with you.
He's in the same boat as Tarasenko. If he's the third line right wing, sure. But he's not going to sign here to play third line right wing. Patrick Kane still thinks it's showtime. Patrick Kane still thinks Obama's president. I don't really have an interest in Patrick Kane getting shoehorned into the top six in the first power play again because he's going to expect that if he's on the team. The Rangers bent over backwards trying to accommodate him when he was physically compromised, didn't do a whole lot while he was here, and then went to another team. Again, like Tarasenko, if Patrick Kane was willing to take less money, he would have been on the team this year. But he wanted more money, and he wanted to play a lot. So he went to a bad team in Detroit, put up a lot of nice counting stats, cherry-picked, scored some goals, has a nice number. I'm sure he's going to get paid this summer. He's going to get 3 or 4 years, $4 or $5 million per year. Let the Sabres give it to him. I don't want 38, 39-year-old Patrick Kane on the Rangers. And then defenseman, I think the Rangers should be looking at a veteran defenseman to fill out just to be safe. I don't think any of these guys, other than maybe Gustafsson, check that box. But you got up there, you got Gostisbehere, you got Brady Shea, Montour, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Dylan DeMello, Gustafsson, aforementioned, Tyler Myers, and then Sean Walker. Shattenkirk, I think, would make sense. Zadorov, he's interesting, but I think he's too expensive for the role the Rangers would want him for. Mike Riley, I would be fine with. Dmitry Kulikov, I'd be fine with. Brendan Dillon, I think, is probably too expensive. Chris Tanev, would love him. He's probably too expensive. Pesce, probably too expensive. And frankly, if you were to sign Pesce, you almost have to get rid of Trouba because it wouldn't make sense to have him in the mix as well. And then Ian Cole, I think Ian Cole is like the prototypical, like if you just scratched his name out, the fill-in 6D. That's what he is. And I could definitely see a world where he's if we don't like what Jones does in camp, he's on the team already. We can play Ian Cole right away and it won't be an issue.
I like Sean Walker as a name that the Rangers could target. Especially because he played not great in Colorado. He played so well in Philadelphia. His underlying stats in Philadelphia were great as well.
Yes.
And then you get to Colorado. The trade itself was great for Colorado as well. They get a great a defenseman that really exceeded all expectations. He played such a solid game on a team that, you know, they flailed out at the end of the year, but through the vast 98% of the season, they played way over what they were supposed to, and Sean Walker was a big part of that. You get to the Avs, and he just didn't fit. I don't know. Maybe it was a new system. Maybe
it's probably a style thing.
Maybe
in
it was
all
a
honesty.
style thing. He just didn't look comfortable a lot of the time, and I wonder if that brings his price down, and maybe it brings his price down enough to entice him to come here with what little cap space they might have. I don't know if we can sit here and guesstimate how much he could make and how long and whatever, but he's a name that is going to look for a bounce back, and I don't think his number is going to be as high as it could have been had he played as well with the Avs and with Philadelphia. So maybe that's an under the radar target that the Rangers are looking at.
If Price were no object, the person I want most on that page is Chris Tanev, because he's exactly the defense. He has the skills that the Rangers are starved for. They need a defense-first defenseman that actively stops scoring chances from happening, because that's what Chris Tanev does. Elite positioning, really good at blocking shots, and most importantly, he can still handle the puck while doing those things. It is really hard to get the defensive defenseman who's also capable of not being a total liability with their puck on the stick. Okay, the next slide I'm pulling up, these are all trade candidates. These are all guys that are in the last or second to last year of their deals, or just outright they are in need of a change of scenery. So this is where it can get interesting for the Rangers, because the Rangers do have a cupboard. Zegras you see on there, Yanni Gourde is there, Michael Backlund is on there, Kevin Hayes is on there. We've got a whole bunch of people here. The one thing I want to highlight and talk about here, the Rangers are going to have to take away from the team they have if they want to get better. That's something you and I have really talked about a lot in the last 2 weeks that I don't think people want to admit. Like I'd rather have Shane Pinto. I'd rather have Jake Evans. The Rangers need to start getting creative here. And just because they've been good, the bar is not good. The Rangers need to be great. Yeah. You go over to the next tab. This is where it really gets interesting, because you add any of these guys to the mix for the Rangers: Mangiapane, Adrian Kempe, Brandon Tanev, Vasily Podkolzin, Ryan Hartman, our boy Booch, Travis Konechny, Alex Tuck. You add any of those guys to the Rangers to play on the second line, you're cooking. Yeah. If that's your Kakko replacement, you add one of those guys. I know Podkolzin's a bit more of a projection because he didn't get a lot of burn last year, because very clearly Rick Tocchet doesn't like offense-first guys, which is fine. But I do think there's an argument that he's an ideal change of scenery guy, because A, he won't be expensive because he's coming off a no counting stats year, and B, he wants ice time. He very much needs to play, and I think that's an opportunity for the Rangers. In an ideal world, I am not getting off of the phone with Cheveldayoff till I get Rutger McGroarty in the organization, because the Rangers have draft picks. The Rangers have roster players. What do you want? You want Kakko? You want Will Cooley? Do you want Hedel? Yeah. Do you want draft picks? Do you want Schneider? Do you want Lindgren? You turn one of those guys into Rutger McGroarty, you've got cost certainty. You've got ELC cost certainty. Because McGroarty's so cheap, you're going to have $2-3 million more to play with, and you can get another guy on this page.
Kakko and the 30th pick for McGroarty plus.
Yeah, throw probably one more piece in there from the Rangers side. But yeah, I'm doing that every single time.
Yeah, easily.
The Rangers need to get creative here. And then over on the defense tab, Landon Ferraro, who I am intrigued in solely based on his transition stats. His underlying numbers are atrocious. He's on San Jose. You give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt on that. But good skater, good puck mover, something the Rangers definitely lead. Nick Hague, same kind of boat. Somebody, Vegas needs to do roster surgery. They need to come up with some cap space. He's somebody I could see them moving on from. John Merrill, very cheap defensive defenseman. He's kind of the same vein as Ian Cole. You go on down the list here. Ville Heinola, same kind of deal as Podkolzin, where he can't get into his team. He needs to play. He's already 23. He got drafted when I was still in college. He needs a chance to play. Chychrun, somebody I've been high on, even though I don't love how he played in Ottawa last year. Jordan Harris is on here.
I don't think anybody loved how anybody played in Ottawa last
year. That's also very fair. Jordan Harris, the Montreal guy that's on there, he's somebody who, they have about 9 defensemen in the organization. He's somebody who needs some runway. I know things might be a little bit weird when it comes to trying to trade with Montreal because of the Gorton stuff, but the Rangers have opportunities here. There are options to improve this team. Oh, and the Predator is Jeremy Lauzon, if you were wondering. The Rangers have opportunities here. And then the Coyote on the far left is Nick Bukestad. And then the Coyote over here on the far right is Juuso Valimaki. I went through and looked for guys who need to play. The Rangers have spots for guys who need to play. And these guys are all going to be cheap for the most part. Trevor Zegras won't be cheap. But if you go down the list and look at some of these guys, Shane Pinto, he's an RFA. What do the Senators really want? That's the type of swing the Rangers need to take. I was talking about this the other day with somebody in regards to Pierre-Luc Dubois to Washington, and they go, why would you do that? Well, either you're going to be a dog shit team no matter what, or Dubois is something, and maybe you're not as bad as you thought you were going to be. When you're in that boat where Washington is, where you basically got no chance of adding an elite player of their own free will, you got to take swings. The Rangers got to take a swing here for somebody.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about PLD is, I talked about this with a couple of Caps people, is like, he's got all the talent in the world. He just never wants to use it. He's one of the most frustrating players in the league, and also one of the main reasons why this trade was bad for Washington. And yes, I understand where you're coming from, and I understand where Washington's coming from. Where okay, Kemper didn't play well, and they just don't have the capability of playing both him and Liger at the same time in the net. And he makes too much money, so you move on. Trade him to somewhere and get something in return. Like, I understand that. But with Washington did LA the biggest of favors, because LA gave PLD this ridiculously awful contract that is going to be stuck to him until he's 59 years old.
It's the tax, though. It's the free agent tax.
Right. Like, I get all that, but to not ask LA or to make LA retain anything on that contract, it was just bad business. I get all that. When you're Washington, you need something to fill out the roster. You're not going to get the big free agents. Maybe Pierre-Luc Dubois finally figures out that he's a good hockey player, and maybe he puts that to good use in Washington. Who knows? Maybe he could be the Backstrom replacement. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but Washington, I guess, is dreaming of that scenario. But LA gave him an albatross, and Washington said, "Oh, that's fine. We'll take it on." When they're already paying a bunch of guys big contracts that they gave out after the Cup win because they wanted everybody to sail off into the sunset in a Caps jersey. That was really the crux of my hatred for this deal. I'm a Caps fan. Yeah, I mean, Pierre-Luc Dubois, in a vacuum, if you were just doing one for one, it makes sense for Washington. But with that awful contract to his side, it's a bad deal for Washington. Oh, not good.
They have to take swings. That's the thing. They're screwed. Washington is screwed no matter what they do. They're probably going to be dreadful for at least 3 or 4 years once Ovechkin retires. Frankly, they're not a good team to begin with, even with Ovechkin, sure. But at least they're relevant. They have a reason. People will care. The minute Ovechkin retires, that team has no viable long-term pieces.
No.
They are very much old. They are very much expensive. They're not particularly competitive. But circling back to the
somebody
Rangers,
on YouTube also said, "What do we think about Arvidsson for right winger?" I mean, I like Arvidsson. Like, he
just hasn't been healthy in a while. That's the one caveat.
Right.
If you can get him on like the Connor Brown type deal of we'll pay you out next year based on certain incentives, I think that is a more interesting argument for Arvidsson, because he just hasn't played a lot the last couple of years because he's small and he does get hurt. As much as I bemoan the size queens on the internet who are constantly begging the Rangers to get bigger and stronger, Victor Arvidsson's 5'10", 175 pounds. He hasn't played more than 80. He played 77 games 2 years ago, 66, 50, 57, 58. And he's 30, and you're telling me that's the long term? For a 1 year Connor Brown type thing, sure. If the Rangers don't want to commit to anybody in free agency because they're too expensive and they want to roll the dice on guys, similar to what they did last year, like Gustafsson, Wheeler, Quick, those types. If they want to do that type of thing, sure, Arvidsson makes sense.
Yeah.
But don't tell me Victor Arvidsson's going to be the first line right wing on the team that's going to win the Stanley Cup. If Victor Arvidsson's on the team next year, he's going to be in like the Kakko role. He's going to be the third line right wing or the second line right wing. I think this tab, more so than the one before, I think the skill sets the Rangers need are here.
Yeah.
Mangiapane, Ross Colton, Ryan Hartman.
I do think Ross Colton is being targeted by the Devils. That is my hashtag insider for the tidbit for the show. The Devils, and
they want to bring the Jersey guy home.
The Ross Colton New Jersey connection is alive. I'll say that.
I like Colton. I like Yanni Gourde, who's on here as well. I think if the Rangers really want to right the wrong of the Barclay Goodrow contract, they should do it by signing an actually good third-line center and understanding, this is what makes a guy good. Because Yanni Gourde, very good hockey player. And I have Zegras on here. I don't think the Rangers are going to be in the market for Trevor Zegras because from all accounts, Pat Verbeek is miserable to trade with. It's why the Oilers had to give up a first-round pick for Adam Henrique. And don't get me wrong, Henrique scored some big goals for them on this playoff run, but I don't think Adam Henrique in his current state was worth the first-round pick without something else coming with him. I'm going to go back to full screen now, but objectively, we're all in agreement. The Rangers need to add to this group. They're only going to have about $4 million to do that if they retain both Schneider and Lindgren at what their perceived asking price is.
And if they keep Trouba.
And if they keep Trouba. The Rangers have options here. Trouba goes to a 15 team on the 1st. Then you can do something. The problem with that is you would ideally probably make that trade happen during the draft, which is when you get more action done. But the buyout window opens as soon as the Cup final is over. I don't think they will buy out Trouba. Financially, it wouldn't be that big of a deal to buy out Trouba. That's the one caveat there. The Rangers need to improve this roster. There are plenty of avenues to doing that. I think I think me, I think a lot of people, we want to see what Drury's vision is. Because if they go back to the bargain bin again, like they did last year, if they do the 2024 version of Blake Wheeler, Eric Gustafsson, and Jonathan Quick, if it's like Arvidsson and Jake Evans and like one more bottom 6 guy and a John Merrill type or Ian Cole, I don't think that's going to excite anybody. Nobody's going to feel, oh, the team's definitely better. Could it be? Sure. But the Rangers have opportunities here. And that's the thing. The cupboard is relatively stocked. You gave away some picks for Wemberg and Roslovic, sure. You got plenty of prospects.
They're not very meaningful, so
it's seconds, it's fourth.
Fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's not ideal, especially for a guy like Roslovic. But it
was only a fourth. That's not
fine.
A big deal.
Well, yeah, Roslovic was for these guys.
Fourth, that's fine.
For a fourth, that's right. But again, when you
they gave up a second for Patrick Kane with one hip. Roslovic for a fourth is a lot better.
I mean, we argue at the time with that. It was a ridiculous trade for a multitude of reasons, but also Patrick Kane only wanted to come here.
And that was the best you could do.
Still give up a second-round pick?
Yeah.
To get him?
Yeah.
Why?
Not great.
Why?
Now we're at a point. Let's talk about Shesterkin real quick because I think that's the undercurrent of all of this. I think if they knock that Shesterkin extension out this summer, I think they're not adding a thing. I think they are going to roll it into next summer and pray Draisaitl is there. I think that is their big aspiration right now. I think based on everything I've read, the only way the Rangers are getting more liquid, they trade Kakko, another $2.5 million. Sure. Okay, we're up to like $14 million. You want an impact player in this league, the starting number is a 7. Minimum a 7. If you want Marchessault, you're giving him 4 years, $7.5 million minimum. That's the starting point. The counterpoint to that is go into the trade market. Go get Trevor Zegras. Go get Andrew Mangiapane.
Love Mangiapane.
Mangiapane is the exact type of skill set the Rangers need. You put him with Kreider and Zibanejad and just tell him, go get the puck. He's great at that. In Calgary the last few years, they've played him with Backlund and Blake Coleman. They have elite underlying numbers every single year. They win every single loose puck. They are great defensively. If Mangiapane is on this team, he's going to get back into that 25, 30 goal category he was 2 years ago. Calgary is a team to pick the bones on. Ottawa is a team to pick the bones on.
Yep.
There are a lot of teams right now that are in weird in-between states that need to remodel how they look.
And also Calgary, for what it's worth, I mean, the Markstrom trade, apparently the rumor is that they valued Kevin Ball, a 23, 24-year-old defenseman who was fine.
Oh, no, Ball stinks. He stinks.
Yeah,
I've watched a lot of Kevin Ball the last 2 years.
Listen. I'm trying to be as positive about this trade as possible, but like the Flames valued him over somebody like Holtz, which is asinine. Just asinine.
They traded like 6 defensemen in the last 4 months.
Right. Again, like they have 17 defensemen. How many defensemen do they need? Which again goes to one, Calgary is going to be active in the trade front at the draft, and then probably after that as well. Drury has to be in on that. Because you see Craig Conroy making all these deals. Some of them aren't very good. Hey, Craig, what do you want for Mangiapane. Let's have a conversation.
I will give you
Who do
Blake
you want?
Coleman.
Who do you want for Rasmus Anderson?
Anderson,
Who do you want for Blake Coleman? Who do you want for, insert player? Drury has to be bombarding Conroy with calls.
He's not Peter Chiarelli, but that's the kind of vibe. I'm going to keep calling until I find a way to make this deal happen. Yeah. I think Calgary is a team that has talented players that very clearly isn't going anywhere. They are going to be dreadful next season. It's going to be
a bad team. And led by Dustin Wolf, who
I was going to say Wolf or Vladar.
I think he's going to be a good goalie, but the problem is that the Flames are kind of in that before it went all wild card, of that 9-12 hellhole.
Yeah.
Of they're not good enough to go anywhere, but they're not bad enough to just bottom out.
Oh, they're going to be dreadful
and go for the next Celebrini in the next year's draft. Right, but the idea is that if the roster looks the same with Dustin Wolf, then they're just not going to be the worst team in the Western Conference.
Oh, I think I would not be surprised if Vladar gets more starts next year based on the way they've slow played Dustin Wolf the entire time. Circling back around to finish up on the Rangers, you're going to hear a lot over the next week. The Rangers are one of those teams with a large fan base that is very vocal online. There's a reason Frank Saravelli has been talking about Patrick Kane and the Rangers for 3 years. This is guaranteed engagement. This is guaranteed clicks. 3 years ago, I remember I was at a soccer field with my friends. We were playing half field, and I was drinking water. I was sitting on the floor. It was like a week into July, and he tweeted this pullout from an article. The Blackhawks' rumored asking price for Patrick Kane from the New York Rangers is Alexis Lafreniere or Capo Caco as a starting point. The Rangers are guaranteed engagement. Take a deep breath. Do not allow people who are very clearly not reporting or writing or producing content in good faith upset you. This is all conjecture right now. No one knows anything.
It's all a show.
It is all a show. It's all smoke and mirrors. It is all a show. People need to fill content demands because they sold advertising space. Give it a week. We will know what's going to happen right at the same time as the insiders. We're going to know as soon as they do.
Oh, well, the team accounts are going to break the news, and then they'll just quote tweet it with the pointing down emoji with this, confirming this.
I love insider word salad. The situation is very fluid. Yeah. It is advancing in the right direction.
It might happen.
This is very helpful. Thank you.
This is really good. This is great
Pierre
stuff.
LeBrun tweeting, it will be reported soon. By who?
You're the guy. You're the reporter guy. You're the insider. You're supposed to know these things.
Oh, God. What a world.
So good. Well, it goes back to whenever we get to free agency as well, of the words, the 240 character word salad that means nothing about how good a player actually is. You'll get
they love his compete.
They love the compete level. He's a big body, and he's a great locker room presence.
Do you think those guys
said
know,
all of
tricks?
These words, and none of them are about how good he plays on the ice? Please tell me, how is his skating? How is his puck handling? How is he in transition? Please, a molecule's worth of actual information about this player, as opposed to his listed weight and how many friends he has around the league. I'm begging you, please.
That was the joke. I forget who made the joke at the time, but the Nets going out of their way to sign DeAndre Jordan the same summer they brought in Kyrie and Durant. And someone made the joke, do you think DeAndre Jordan knows magic tricks and that's why everybody likes him? Does Barclay Goodrow know magic tricks? Is he like a tank when they all go out drinking as a team? Does he always pick up the check? What kind of teammate are you? If you Barclay Goodrow should be picking up a lot of checks in San Jose. Macklin Calabrini's going to need you to take care of him, Barclay. I want to end on this. The Cup final is going to be determined tonight.
Yeah.
No matter what happens, there will be massive overreactions one way or the other in terms of what the takeaway is. For 3 years after Tampa Bay went back-to-back, it was you need to have the right third line as opposed to your two best players need to average 2 points per game for your entire playoff run. After Vegas won, it was you can be as cutthroat as you want in your roster construction. You need to improve at all costs. I think if Edmonton wins, I think you will see a lot of people say the key is tanking and you need to get those guys at the top of the draft. If Florida wins, I think the toughness and the physicality guys are going to have their wet dream because they're going to point to Sam Bennett, they're going to point to Kachuk, they're going to point to Luosterainen, Evan Rodriguez. Those are all talented hockey players. I think a lot of this series and the takeaways from it were kind of preordained. I think you came into this series with a perception of which team was built the right way, as opposed to letting the games play out and then trying to learn from what's going on. I think there isn't a case. I don't think it's feasible in hockey. And you and I have talked about this for 3 years, almost 3 years. You can't look at what other teams do and say, let's do that.
Yep.
That's not a viable path. I think you can identify players on other teams who are successful and say, that guy is good at hockey. But I think you need to take that next step. The idea that why are they good at hockey? And I think, and somebody said this in my replies today, Adam Gretz said it in my replies, if they bring back Patrick Kane, that tells you the Rangers have not identified what made Patrick Kane work in Detroit. I think that doesn't tell you the Rangers understand how they need to improve the team. I think based on who they bring in, that will tell you if they've learned their lesson. And I think that's the big theme. They were really good in the regular season. They had their best season in the history of their 98-year history as a team. It wasn't good enough. If you run back the same exact team and you change forwards 11, 12, and defensemen 6, I don't think you're going to inspire a whole lot of confidence that you've learned your lesson. Now, if those guys all project a certain vision, if they bring in a Gustafsson facsimile and they bring in another Will Cooley type, then okay, we're having a conversation. But until we know who it is, I think everybody take a deep breath. I think you buckle up. I think the next 10 days are going to be very hectic league-wide. And based on how the Rangers have operated the last few years, we're not going to know until right when the move happens. Because you look at the guys they've acquired at the deadlines the last few years. Tarasenko kind of came out of nowhere. This year, Roslovic kind of came out of nowhere. Wenberg kind of came out of nowhere. I think the Alex Tuck stuff right around the deadline came out of nowhere. I think there's a good chance the Rangers bring in guys who weren't on either of the slides in the projection I had earlier.
Maybe.
I think we won't know until it happens because that's just the way the Rangers have operated under Drury. They don't leak pretty much at all.
No, well, yeah, and that's by design, and also for what it's worth, today is this is like kind of an underlying storyline here. This is a big Paul Maurice legacy game. I mean, this man has been coaching for 25 years in the NHL, has never won a Stanley Cup. This year, he's been very positive because he's funny. So a lot of the media and a lot of the attention that he gets is positive because he's funny. But if he blows a 3-0 lead in the finals, that's not gonna be good for his legacy. I'll tell you that.
Oh, Oilers win this. This is the greatest comeback in the history of hockey, and it's arguably
might be in pro sports.
It's either this or the Red Sox. It depends how
the 2016 Cavs as well.
Yeah, that was 3-1 though. 3-0 is different from 3-1. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
But when you face a team that's won 73 regular season games and they were cruising the whole way, it's up there.
Imagine the Oilers lose this series and they find a way to trade for but they find a way to bring in Stamkos, they find a way to do their Durant. That's kind of how I'm thinking about. I'm thinking
they would have to move Nurse to be able to make that happen.
No
one's gonna want Nick Nurse. I said Nick Nurse. No one's gonna want.
Hey, bro, Nurse. Philadelphia paid a lot of money because how bad they wanted Nick Nurse.
That's right. He's a nice guy. I think that Nick Nurse.
Yeah, no, he's definitely he's got a ring. Nobody can ever talk shit to Nick Nurse ever again. Darnell Nurse, you can talk as much shit as you want. I don't care. That doesn't faze me. Andrew and I going to call it an episode. We will talk to you guys real soon. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcast. If you're on Apple or Spotify, be so kind. Throw the show 5 stars. If you're watching over on YouTube, leave us a comment. Let us know. Not even what player do you want? What type of skill set do you want? Because then I can go and do some research. I can give you candidates, and we can have a nice little back and forth. So give us an idea of what types of skill sets you want to see the Rangers prioritize. Andrew and I will talk to you guys real soon. Hopefully nothing ridiculous happens in Rangers world because frankly, I'm tired and I don't want to have to do extraneous stuff. we'll talk to you guys real soon. Until then.